History remembers him as a hero, a king who stood against an empire, a warrior who chose death over surrender. But what if the legend hides something darker? What if the man who defied Xerxes was not simply brave, but engineered? Not born noble, but stripped of mercy. To understand Leonidas, you have to look beyond the cape, beyond the shield, beyond the myth, into the machine that built him. Spartans, prepare your breakfast and eat well, because tonight we dine in Hades. That line echoes through history like the clash of bronze against bronze. 300 men, a narrow mountain pass, an empire so vast its numbers blurred into myth. It sounds like the purest story of courage ever told. But courage was only the surface. Beneath it was something colder, something calculated. Leonidas was not born a hero, he was manufactured. To understand him, you have to understand Sparta. Not the romanticized city of disciplined warriors, but a paranoid fortress built on fear. Sparta did not fear Persia, not at first. It feared the people beneath its own boots, the Helots, state-owned slaves who outnumbered true Spartans 10 to 1, sometimes 20 to 1. Every Spartan child grew up knowing a simple truth. If the Helots ever rose together, Sparta would drown in its own blood. So Sparta built a society that was always at war, even in peace. Young men formed the Crypteia, a secret police who hunted rebellious Helots in the night. Not for glory, not for justice, for training. To teach boys how to stalk, how to kill silently, how to feel nothing. This was the air Leonidas breathed from birth. He was born around 540 BC into the royal house of the Aegiads, one of Sparta's two ruling families. Two kings always, a system designed to prevent tyranny. But royalty in Sparta meant no silk, no luxury, no softness, especially for Leonidas. Because he was not the heir. He had two older brothers. The throne was never meant for him, and that accident of birth would define everything. At 7 years old, Leonidas was taken from his family and thrown into the Agoge. The Spartan training system was not education, it was erasure. 13 years of controlled suffering designed to carve away individuality and replace it with obedience. 1 tunic per year. No shoes, no blankets. They slept on reeds they pulled from the river with bleeding hands. They were fed just enough to survive, never enough to be satisfied. Hunger was intentional. They were encouraged to steal food, but savagely beaten if caught. The lesson was not morality, it was competence. Do not fail, do not be seen, do not be weak. Older boys ruled over younger ones, enforcing discipline with fists and humiliation. Pain was constant, emotion was dangerous, words were scarce. Speak only when necessary, and when you speak, make it count. Most children broke under that pressure. They became silent tools of the state. But Leonidas did something different. He thrived. Where others endured, he competed. Where others suffered, he adapted. Hunger sharpened him, cold hardened him, pain became a boundary to push past, not avoid. The Agoge did not destroy him, it refined him. While he was being forged in barracks and dust, fate was moving quietly in the royal palace. His eldest brother, Cleomenes, the heir, had been spared the Agoge, raised as a prince, comfortable, untested. His second brother, Dorius, endured the same brutal system as Leonidas, but with pride and ambition burning in his chest. When their father died, Cleomenes became king, and Dorius could not accept it. The
the warrior forced to kneel before a man he saw as weak. Rather than serve, he chose exile. He left Sparta to build his own kingdom abroad and died chasing glory. One brother gone. Then Cleomenes began to unravel. Brilliant one moment, unstable the next, starting wars without approval, manipulating oracles, growing paranoid. Eventually, the ephors declared him insane. He was arrested, shackled, and then, under suspicious circumstances, found dead in his cell, his body mutilated, officially by his own hand. The heir was dead, the rival was dead, and suddenly the third son, the one who was never meant to rule, stood alone. Leonidas did not seize the throne, he outlived it. Around 490 BC, he became king of Sparta, not because he was destined for greatness, but because he survived every other possibility. Sparta had placed its crown on the head of the most perfectly conditioned product it had ever created. And across the sea, an empire was preparing to test him.
Far to the east, in palaces of gold and stone, another king was rising. His name was Xerxes. He did not command a city of warriors. He commanded an empire that stretched across continents, from India to Egypt, from Babylon to the shores of Asia Minor. Millions lived and died under his authority. They called him King of Kings. To many, he was not a man at all, but a living god. Years before Leonidas took the throne, Xerxes' father, Darius, had attempted to crush Greece. At Marathon, a small Athenian force had humiliated the Persian Empire. The defeat burned. It was a stain on imperial pride. When Xerxes inherited the throne, he inherited that humiliation. For nearly a decade he prepared. Roads were carved through mountains, supply lines mapped across deserts. Entire peoples were conscripted into an army so vast that ancient historians claimed it numbered in the millions. Even if exaggerated, the truth remained terrifying. The Persian war machine dwarfed anything Greece could assemble. While Xerxes built an empire on movement and intimidation, Leonidas ruled Sparta with cold stability. No madness, no theatrics, just discipline. He understood the balance of fear and force that kept Sparta alive. And beside him stood Gorgo, his queen. In Sparta, women were not silent shadows. They were educated, respected, hardened in their own way. Gorgo matched Leonidas in clarity and resolve. When a warning arrived from Persia, hidden beneath wax on a wooden tablet, it was she who understood the trick, scrape the surface, read what lies beneath. Xerxes was coming. To cross into Europe, Xerxes ordered the construction of a massive bridge of ships across the Hellespont. When a storm destroyed it, he did not accept nature's will. He ordered the sea whipped, 300 lashes against the water. Engineers executed for failure. This was not strategy, it was ego. Then came the diplomats. Persian envoys traveled from city to city, demanding earth and water, the symbols of submission. Accept Xerxes as your master, or be erased. Many Greek city-states surrendered. Fear fractured alliances. The vision of Persian armies blotting out the horizon was enough to break resolve before a single spear was thrown. Then the envoys reached Sparta. They delivered their demand before the kings and ephors, earth and water. Leonidas listened. He had been raised to understand something Xerxes did not. Power without restraint rots from within. Submission would not save Sparta, it would only delay destruction. The Spartans seized the messengers and dragged them to a well. "You want earth and water?" they said. "Find it yourselves." The
the bodies hit the bottom. With that single act, Leonidas crossed a line from which there was no return. Killing envoys was sacrilege, even in war. Xerxes would not answer with diplomacy. He would answer with annihilation. Panic swept Greece. Emergency councils were called. For once, rival city-states looked to Sparta, not for philosophy or trade, but for survival. The strategy formed was desperate but logical. A naval defense at sea, a land defense at a narrow pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates, a thin strip of land between mountain and sea, a place where numbers meant nothing. But fate intervened in a different way. It was the time of the Carneia, Sparta's sacred religious festival. During this period, the Spartan army could not march to war. The law was absolute, even in the face of invasion. Leonidas stood before the ephors and asked permission to mobilize. They refused. Religion bound the army in place while Persia marched. For a lesser man, that would have been the end, but the Agoge had taught Leonidas to find cracks in systems. The law forbade the army from marching, but it said nothing about the king's personal guard, the Hippies, 300 elite warriors, the best of the best. Leonidas announced he would take only them. Officially, it was not war, it was reconnaissance, a forward presence. The ephors could not object. Then he gave a final instruction, quiet, deliberate, chilling. Only men with living sons could go. He was not selecting soldiers, he was selecting sacrifices. Leonidas understood the mathematics of war. 300 could not defeat hundreds of thousands. The goal was not victory, it was delay, inspiration, time. He was ensuring that their bloodlines would not end with them. In Sparta, farewells were not drenched in tears. Mothers handed shields to their sons with a single command: return with it or on it. Victory or death carried home. Gorgo asked him what she must do. He answered without hesitation: marry a good man, bear strong sons. He was not planning to return. Before marching north, Leonidas consulted the oracle at Delphi. The prophecy was merciless. Either Sparta would fall or a king would die. For Leonidas, it was not a warning, it was confirmation. He did not march toward Thermopylae hoping to survive. He marched knowing he would not. 7,000 Greeks gathered at the pass, far fewer than promised. The cliff rose on one side, the sea crashed on the other. At its narrowest, the path was barely wide enough for a few dozen men. Perfect. When Xerxes arrived and saw the tiny force waiting, he sent one final offer: lay down your weapons. Leonidas's reply was as sharp as any blade: come and take them. The war had begun.
The Persian army moved like a living continent. Archers darkened the sky, drums thundered across the cliffs. Soldiers from a dozen nations advanced in glittering armor: Medes, Immortals, Egyptians, Babylonians. Xerxes sat upon a golden throne overlooking the narrow pass at Thermopylae, confident that this would be over before the sun set. He sent a messenger: lay down your weapons. Leonidas did not blink. Come and take them. The first wave advanced. At the narrowest point of the pass, the Persian advantage vanished. Their numbers meant nothing when only a handful could engage at once. Spartan shields locked, spears extended, discipline turned flesh into machinery. The Persians crashed against bronze and were thrown back. Again and again. For 2 days the assault continued. Xerxes hurled his best troops forward, the Immortals, his elite guard. They died like the rest.
The Spartans rotated from front to rear with precision drilled into them since childhood in the Agoge. Exhausted men stepped back, fresh warriors stepped forward. The line never broke. The ground became mud mixed with blood. From his throne, Xerxes watched disbelief turn to fury. He had expected surrender, collapse, begging. Instead, he saw defiance. But empires do not rely only on strength, they exploit weakness. On the second night, a local Greek named Ephialtes crept into the Persian camp. He revealed a secret path through the mountains, a narrow trail that bypassed the pass entirely. For reward and survival, he betrayed his homeland. Xerxes smiled. Before dawn, Persian forces marched silently along the hidden route. A scout reached Leonidas with the news. They were surrounded. Now came the moment that would define history. Leonidas assembled the Greek commanders. The situation was clear. Hold and die. Retreat and perhaps live to fight another day. He dismissed most of the allied forces. This was no longer about strategy. It was about legacy. 300 Spartans remained. With them stood 700 Thespians who refused to leave, and a small contingent of Thebans bound by uneasy loyalty. Fewer than 2,000 against an empire. Leonidas did not rage. He did not despair. He simply prepared. At dawn, the Persians attacked from both sides. The Greeks charged forward, not back. Their spears shattered. They drew swords. When swords broke, they fought with bare hands and teeth. The fighting spilled beyond the narrowest choke point into open ground where numbers began to matter. One by one, the Spartans fell. Leonidas himself was struck down in the chaos. Persian soldiers fought viciously over his body. The Spartans counterattacked repeatedly to recover his king. 4 times they drove the enemy back to reclaim him. Finally, overwhelmed by arrows raining from every direction, the last of the defenders collapsed beneath a storm of missiles. Silence followed. Xerxes walked the battlefield. The cost had been enormous, thousands of Persian dead for a handful of Greeks. Furious at the humiliation, he ordered Leonidas's body beheaded and crucified, an act almost unheard of in Persian tradition. It was not strategy, it was wounded pride. The pass fell. The road into Greece lay open. Athens would burn. And yet, something unexpected had happened. Word of the stand at Thermopylae spread faster than Xerxes' army. Across Greece, fear began to harden into resolve. The sacrifice bought time, time for fleets to gather, for cities to prepare, for alliances to solidify. Weeks later, at sea near the island of Salamis, the Persian navy would suffer a catastrophic defeat. A year after that, at Plataea, the Persian land forces would be crushed. Xerxes' grand invasion would unravel. The empire that seemed unstoppable would retreat, and the name Leonidas would echo far beyond Sparta. A small stone marker was eventually placed at the site of the final stand. It bore a simple inscription: "Stranger, tell the Spartans that we lie here, obedient to their laws." No boast, no curse, just duty fulfilled. For centuries, the story would grow. Poets would recite it. Historians would debate it. Artists would immortalize it. In modern times, films like 300 would transform the battle into stylized legend, muscles exaggerated, blood turned to spectacle. But beneath the myth remained a harder truth. Thermopylae was not about victory. It was about choosing how to face the inevitable. Leonidas understood something Xerxes did not. Power enforced by fear demands constant obedience. Power earned by sacrifice inspires loyalty long after death. The Spartans lost the battle, but they shifted the war. And in doing so, they altered the course of Western history. When we look back across 2.5 millennia, we do not remember the exact number of Persian soldiers. We do not remember the names of the immortals who fell. We remember 300. We remember a narrow pass between mountain and sea. We remember a king who knew he would die and marched anyway. And sometimes that is enough.